All right, welcome back. We are COMP1011. That's Advanced OP with Java in the summer 2022 semester at Georgian. And it's week 12, part one of our broadcast and recording. Hey, Sarah, how you doing? So a couple things we want to talk about right now. Last time we were together, which was week 10, last week we didn't have class, and that's because of my issue. I had problems connecting to the network in general. And that was largely because of weird power outages and some weird internet problems that I had in my area. My area is really weird in that I'm in a little pocket where sometimes bad weather will happen around me and I won't get it. And sometimes there'd be no bad weather anywhere else or no bad issues and I'll get it, even if it's a sunny day. So it's really strange where I am. I'm just kind of south of the lake, south of Lake Simcoe there. So that's where I'm situated, and it's a really weird spot, to kind of to do that stuff. It's getting better, but I'll tell you, when I first moved out here, it was kind of a weird spot to be in, especially when you're remote teaching, which is kind of neat. So far, bar any kind of interruptions, it hasn't been that bad. But last week was a kind of anomaly. So back in operation this week. I swear everything is good, and but that's thrown us off our little schedule. So we talked last time about what it's an API, Postman, all this kind of stuff. And I thought it was a pretty good lesson in terms of getting you connected to an API, which was OMDB. And I was going to give you a more complex assignment 3, assignment 4, but there's just no time. So what we need to do is we need to adjust our evaluations a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So let's talk about course evaluations and how that's going to change for this course. Well, we missed an in-class exercise because that was supposed to be something we did together last week. So that kind of threw us off. So instead of taking the best 10 out of 12, it's going to be now the best 9 out of 11. We missed a class. It is what it is. I'm not going to keep holding you guys to stuff we haven't had a chance to do. Assignment 3 was supposed to be a two-parter, assignment 3 and assignment 4. I'm going to combine them, and it's going to be worth 20% by the end of semester. So that's going to be their very last day of semester. I've posted very basic information about what I want you to do about that, and what I'm going to do to make it even easier is it's going to be based on Lab 9. So what I want you guys to do, and if we look at what we did last week with Lab 9, let's just talk about the assignment 3 right now to make it nice and easy. Is Lab 9, when we opened it up, I'm just going to go there for a second, or in-class exercise 9, which is something that we were together with, right? Lab 9, in-class exercise 9. When we ran this thing last day, and this is what we had, right? We had a couple of things we discussed, right? One of the things we talked about was, just to remind you guys, 'cause it's been a couple weeks now, we built an API manager. And the API manager last week basically connected to our API, and I use my API key. This is something that you need to replace for your assignment. So, because you're going to be building a user interface and adding some additional functionality to the app that we didn't do so far. Okay, so we started the app and with the API. And then what you're going to do is, if we run this thing, right now we have very basic functionality in the app, very, very basic, right? And if you look at it, what we do is we can go, kind of reading from OMDB. I can make a search. Like, for example, I can put in something like Star Trek, I don't know, some really weird thing. If I click search, then it should pull up, some Star Trek, movies or whatever from OMDB, which is our the open source movie database. That's what it does. Okay, so very, very simple. All the connections and all that stuff is the same. It even pulls up this little poster of what Star Trek is. I've kind of got this in there, and I've posted this solution so far up on GitHub. So you have the beginning. This is our starter for assignment 3. And but what it allows you to do right now is, if I click on any one of these things, right, as an example, it produces some very interesting things. I can actually go in and look at any of the posters here on the side. So that's what I've kind of positioned with you guys starting off, right? And if I was to search for something else, like let's say, for example, Back to the Future, let's say I do that. If it doesn't match, then it's going to, if I spelled it wrong, it's going to give you this poster not available thing. So that's what I've kind of done for you guys right now. Okay, there's poster not available. But however, if I spell it right, then it actually gives you all the things that are there. So you can click on each one of these things and you'll see what's there, right? If there's something that's missing, let's say, for example, if I typed in Picard, like we did last time, notice that Picard, Star Trek Picard, is something that's there. But there's some other ones that are here, like, for example, a French film, it looks like, which was in 1933, does not have a poster. So then you see this poster not available there as well. So that's what kind of we have, a very simple user interface. And what it does right now is it spits out the item that I'm clicking on. The item that I'm clicking on right now, it gives us a very, very basic, right, information about what that item is. You're going to use this information to build a second scene from this stuff. And we've already kind of have the rudiments or the structure for the scene. So here's our details view. And the details view right now is empty. So your job is to do two things. One, I want you to prettify the original scene that we have here. And what I also want you to do is take the data. So when I click on one of these items here, let's say, for example, Picard or James Picard or whatever, if there's a button that we can put here in the user interface, and it could be anywhere on the user interface that makes sense to you, right? It could even be on the list itself. By the way, you can use a list, you can use a table, you can use any user interface control that you feel like makes sense for you to make this thing look prettier than this, because this is very basic. Things to note is right now I can make this any size I want. You probably want to restrict yourself to a default size, maybe even stop the user from kind of making it like this, or even maximizing, because maximizing can look really ridiculous, right? The other thing that you can see here is that the poster size is a fixed size. Perhaps what you want to do is make it larger so that it's more usable than what this is. This is literally just for testing is what I'm showing you right here, which is your starter right now. It's very, very basic. So I want you to prettify this page. This is like the first scene. Definitely the search criteria is here, right? And when you click on one of these links, it's going to, again, present a button at the bottom. When you click on the button at the bottom, it's going to transport you to a second scene, right? And the second scene itself is going to carry forward the data that you have from this scene. So there's a couple tricky ways to do this, again, and we can discuss some strategies around this. One of them, which is something that I mentioned here, is in your scene manager. So in your scene manager right now, the only thing that the scene manager does is switches scenes, right? And here's the file name. But remember what you can also do. Just because the change scene that we built already only has an event and a file name, those two pieces, right? We can also carry forward other information from the scene manager when it's called. For example, the movie that's been clicked on. All right, so what you can do is you can actually pass in another parameter, so maybe make another version of change scene that not only has event and Fxml file name, but a third parameter that allows you to carry forward the information from one scene to the other scene. And where do you get this information, you might ask? Well, it comes from the movie search results controller, this thing here. The movie search results controller, which is basically the search view controller. The search view controller, when we click on like we said, the search button, then what we're getting is the results from what we've selected. Okay, that's what we're getting here. All right, so we didn't have anything for the movie not found. This is for you to complete. What if the movie's not found? What do you do? Right, as an example, you need to maybe put something out there that says movie not found, maybe some kind of pop-up message or something else. We haven't had a chance to do that. So this is part of it, part of you making it prettier, like we said before, right? That's for assignment 3 that we're talking about right now. So a lot of the functionality is here, but there's still some that's missing. And the primary stuff that's missing is all of the next scene, which is basically all the stuff that you're going to put in your details view controller. In the details view controller, remember what we want to do is the movie itself has a lot of parts. It has the title, the year, the rated, release, runtime, genre, director. I want you to lay this information out in a very appropriate, nice way. So the right controls So when I want to look at a movie complete, including the year, and a little bit of a short plot, what is this movie about, in different kinds of fields that are appropriate for displaying the movie, as well as the poster image using a new image object. Okay, similar to what we did in the search view controller, right? So the search view controller, what it does is when I click on a movie, so remember there's a couple things that happen in the search view controller. If I click the search text field submit button, either there, so let me show you how this works again. Two things can happen here. And again, this is all up on GitHub. So if I type in, for example, Star Trek and just press enter, it's still going to do the search. Okay, that's what's going to happen there. So I don't have to actually click the search button. All right, that's one thing that's happening here. But if I click on any one of these things, it also generates an event. And that's where you're going to get this part, the movie details, right? Because if you think about it, let's take a look, right? So what we're doing is we're setting up another event handler that takes care of all that stuff. So first we set the image by default in initialize. We set the poster, I put the poster inside of the details here. So if you notice here, what I did was the poster itself for the that you can see is right here, poster not found, right? If I double click on it, is right here. This is the one. And this is actually an object that's sitting inside of your resources folder inside of your ICE9. Okay, so that's where it is right now. So this is making it easier for you instead of you looking it up online that we were trying to do the last time. Okay, so that's the one thing. And but let's go back to that, to that search view controller one sec. Okay, so if I go to my search view controller, then remember that I'm outputting system.out.println the movie selected right here. So if you notice what we're doing here, we have an event listener that we've kind of put together inline. This is the result view that we're looking at, the result view itself. And what we're doing is we're looking at the selected item property, right, for on the list, and we've added a listener to each of the items, right? And then when I click on it, I'm outputting that new movie selected. Well, guess what? That new movie selected has all the details you need, right, for you to pass this into the scene manager, right? So things that you can do. Think about how you would do this. You could set up a variable that's here inside of the view controller, maybe somewhere at the top, that's something like current movie selected. And the current movie selected would carry the information for what the movie is that you're going to pass to the scene manager, right? Which is something that hasn't been written yet. So here's the scene manager, but you need to modify the parameters or something like that to pass the information to the other scene. And this is the crux. This is the thing that I'm going to ask you to do for your assignment 3. So pretty straightforward, I think. Most of the connection details are your own. And one last note before I let you, kind of ask me some questions and all that kind of stuff, because we have to move on to other things, is remember for the API manager, please make sure that you get your own API key. So that way you have enough time and you're able to test out, if you haven't done this already, by the way, some of you have already done this, to test out your the OMDB connection. Okay, questions around what I'm asking you to do for assignment 3. And it's due, today we're sitting at week 12, 2 weeks from now on the last Sunday of the semester. So that's August 21st, if I'm not wrong. Okay, lots of time to do this, not too crazy. And I recommend doing it as soon as possible because we're going to get the other assignment that you're going to get for the final test, which is coming up, your final exam, which is practical. You're going to have the entire week 14 to get it done as normal. Again, it won't be that complex, and it'll be based off APIs that we've talked about already. So I don't want you to get clobbered with 2 things at the same time, but I've given you as much time as I can, so that way it compensates for our lost week last week a bit, also reducing some of that stuff. I think it's a very straightforward assignment, and I think it'll boost your mark, not reduce it. Okay, what are your thoughts or questions? I mean, you know what, William? It's up to you. I recommend the OMDB API because it gives you all the information you need to make your little movie search app. What were you thinking? Were you thinking about another API? I want to keep it simple is what I'm trying to do here, right? Just because of the time frame. Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, it's just, I mean, if you wanted to, there's other ones you can use too, but I just want to keep it super simple. All right, anyone else have any questions before I move on to the next topic? Is there a lab report? No, there's no lab report. When you post a PDF for assignment 3, I haven't posted a PDF, but what I did was if you go up to assignments, then you can see that there is this kind of the details that I put in a very high level, and I've also recorded this video for you. And this is what it looks like. It's an individual assignment. You're using Lab 9, which is really ICE 9. Let's make sure it says ICE 9 instead of Lab 9. I'm not sure why I thought lab. In my head, I'm thinking it's a lab. But it's ICE 9 as a starter. And you're going to continue the development of the movie search app. And note, this connects to OMDB API. You need to make your own API key. Use Scene Builder to build an Fxml UI for the movie search. Show each movie as a list and list view or a table view. This is already kind of partly done for you. And include a second scene as the details view of the movie. Include a larger view of the movie poster as well as other movie details, right? That's what you need to do there, okay? So that's kind of similar to what I just said here. Ensure you pass the movie data from the search scene to the detail scene appropriately, and please make sure your app is pretty by using appropriate layout, space, and color with a separate, wow, I really did a bad job here, separate CSS file, okay? And I need a GitHub repository, a link to your private GitHub repo, a link to your short video presentation, and a zip archive of your project files, and that's it. So very straightforward. Okay? I think it's like a super simple assignment that you can get done, and it's going to practice some of the skills. You're still going to manipulate data and all that kind of stuff, and it's going to prepare you just fine for your final exam. Okay, so max 5 minutes or 2 minutes. Guillermo, it's up to you. I think 5 minutes is just fine. I mean, if as long as it's not like 30 minutes for your app, I don't think you need that much time. But even if you did 5 to 10 minutes, it's fine. Whatever makes sense for you. I'm not going to pressure you. Okay? All right. Any other questions related to assignment 3? I think it's super straightforward, and I think you'll be able to knock it off very, very quickly. And it's based on a lot of the stuff we've done in class, which is great. All right. Let's move back. Look at this. My weather. It's always giving me a weather warning here, which is crazy, right? All right. Let's continue. So that is the updates, and please use this as an update for our course evaluations. I'm telling you officially that this is what's going to happen right during our video. And why? Because we have to compensate for the lost week and and all that kind of stuff. Last week we were supposed to talk about threads, and we're supposed to set up our Android Studio. We're going to do that this week. And this week, if you notice again, if all the stuff in red is all the changes. Assignment 3 has been released. It's due at the end of semester. ICE 10 is something that has been put together. It's due at the end of this week. ICE 11 is next week, and that's due at the end of next week. And those are the changes that we're doing so far. And that's the only thing just in the last part of semester, just to compensate for that missing week. All right, so what are we doing this week? We're going to do an intro to Android. We're going to do our tool setup right now. And we're going to create a very simple app and discuss lifecycle functions. This app is going to be the starter app that we're going to put up on ICE 10, and we'll go through it right now. A couple things to note is for ICE 10, we need to deploy to an Android emulator. That is one of the requirements. And there's no lab report required again for this one, but you need to do a very simple video again for this one. So let's do the installation and all that stuff now. So before we get moving, I'll talk about all this. But where you start the installation for Android Studio is right here. Okay, this is the first piece. So please go to this link. Let's do the installation part together, and then I'll discuss. Let's put this link up on the chat. Please go there now. If you haven't done this, by the way, have you guys done this already? How about that? So we might be able to save some time. Yes, no? So Shahil says no. All right. How about everyone else? How about Sneh? Did you get it done, Sneh? I know you were worried. Guillermo did it. Excellent. Okay. How about the rest of you guys? Okay. Aditya did it. That's great. And so what I'm going to do is, if you haven't had a chance to do it, please do so now. It takes some time to do. So if I go to kind of at the top where it says download Android Studio, again, there's some download options. Let's talk about some download options here for different devices. Okay, so if I go to download options, you can see what we have. Okay, so this is fairly new. One thing that's happened is, remember that if you're some person that is using a Mac, okay, I'm just going to put it out there, right? If you're a person that's using a Mac and you have the latest ARM processor, so that means like an M1 chip or something like that, then you need to download a special version of Android Studio in order for it to work for you. And the reason for this is because the architecture for that, for Android Studio for an M1 Mac is different than it is for a regular Intel Mac, right? So if you're a regular Mac person, so Mac 64-bit, that's Intel, then you use this download, this DMG file, all right? For the rest, I recommend using the executable file that you can download for Windows, right? Or if you just go back one step here to this, download the Android Studio right here, which is including, it's called Android Studio Chipmunk. That's the version of Android Studio that we're downloading. And it looks like 2021.2.1 patch 2 for Windows 64-bit. And that's around 929 megabytes is what it says. One thing to note is Android Studio is based off of our beloved IntelliJ IDEA. So if you already have IntelliJ IDEA, it's going to be very similar. And this is the reason why we work with IntelliJ in the first place. So that way, when you transition to Android development, then it's not going to be so terrible. Okay. So, so here's IntelliJ. I'm just going to close IntelliJ off right now. Let's just do that. And let's bring up Android Studio. And again, if you haven't downloaded this, you won't see this, but you can see that this is Android Studio here. I'm just going to close off this app that I was going to show you guys how to build. And on the bottom here, there are some additional things that you can download and install. So when you install Android Studio for the first time, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions, all right? And everything from different plugins. Notice that I've included the Kotlin plugin, and I recommend for next semester, if you guys do Android development, you're probably going to do it in Kotlin. That's my take on it anyway. So that's the plugin perspective. Projects, we can customize Android Studio just like we can when it comes to downloading and installing IntelliJ. That's not very different. There's also a bunch of learning resources for how to get started and how to use Android Studio, which is pretty good. And on the bottom here, you can see that there is, we can edit custom properties, edit custom VM options, and a bunch of other stuff, including checking for updates, okay? So that's one thing. On the right here, where we have projects, notice on the right here, you have this little ellipses, right? You can have, there's a virtual device manager, there's a profile or debug APK, an SDK manager, and import an Android code sample. So those are the four things. What we need to do right now for those people who've downloaded Android ahead of time, and that's awesome if you did, that's going to save a lot of time, is let's go to the SDK manager together. So let's do that first. So I'm going to bring up the SDK manager, and I want to talk about the Android SDKs that I recommend that you download and install for what we're going to do for the last part of this course. Notice that I do not have the latest version, API 33, downloaded or API 32. Okay, I'm not doing that right now. Okay. However, the SDK for API 31, that's been downloaded. So please make sure you have this, as well as Android 11. And if you ever want to know like what APIs and why you would have these APIs, Well, if you actually look at the most common, kind of version of the platform, because Android has a lot of flavors out there, right? As an example, you can always look it up. You can say, most common API or SDK. We'll say Android. Okay, so the most common SDK, most popular SDKs, and it talks about the, and this is from June 2017, so you have to watch it. But there's also, a lot of other things that you can look at to see which one's the most popular one. But I can tell you that a lot of times it'll tell you which one is the kind of the most common OS version. So let's go most common Android OS version 2022. And this should guide, as an example, some of your decisions. So it says, again, Android 11, this is one link, Android 11, has the highest distribution. But the other thing to look at also is this one, gsstatcounter.com. I love looking at this thing. It actually shows you the distribution of kind of your Android OS over time. So you can see that here we're sitting at, end of July, beginning of August 2022. And you can see how some things are on the rise. You see this green line here? This is the OS that's on the rise. And it looks like OS version 12, right? That's what this is on the rise, right? That's that one. You can see that this one here is on the decline. So again, this is version 10. That's on the decline. And here's version 11, and you can see that it's just finished peaking in January, and it's on the decline as well. So the one that's quickly going to be coming up right now, the most popular one that looks like it's going to rise over the next several months is Android version 12. So right now it's got about 20% market share is what it looks like. And you can see that the other ones, like version 10's got 21%, version 11's got about 30%, so those are the big three that are out there. So if we know that 10, 11, and 12, the other ones being lesser, so you can see that Pi has 9 is 10%, and the other ones are there too. So 10, 11, and 12 are the ones we really should be concerned with. The rest, either they're too new or they've come out of favor in terms of how many people have installed them on their machines, and that's why they're here down at the bottom, right? So going back to our installation then, 12 you should definitely have, but it's not as popular. 11 would be the one we want to work in today because, again, like you see, here's 11, and 11 is at the top. It's been the top this whole entire year, right? And 10 is something you may want to consider as well. Okay, I'm not going to do 10. What we're going to be working in and what I want you to install is 11. Most of 11, okay, is what I want you to do. So that means like Android SDK Platform 30, sources for Android 30, ARM64 support, and Intel support for 30, as well as Google APIs. Okay, this will take some time to download. If you have additional ones that you've already downloaded, let's say for example you've already downloaded a lot of 12, that's okay. Or if you did something crazy like up here, these ones, which are, you can see that there's very little support for these ones right now. It's on you if you want to do that. I don't recommend them. I recommend just 12. Okay, 12 and 11. Mostly 11. Make sense? So did anyone not install the SDK? Because you need to, and when you install Android, you need to install your SDK platforms, or else you can't deploy to an emulator. That's kind of a requirement. Did you guys install anything else? Did anyone install a different version of the SDK for Android? Or do you have some installations to do? Some of you may. Absolutely. Well, yeah, you have to check off the ones you want. All right. So the ones you don't want, leave them unchecked. Like for example, the China version of Wear OS 3, I don't think there's any reason for these, right? Or the Wear OS. If we're not going to use any kind of watch OS or anything like that. So we're not going to use these or these, right? So I would only check on the ones you need, like the ones I'm showing you here. Okay. And but yeah, the version I recommend version 11. Version 12, I don't think we're going to work too much in. Again, it's on the rise, but I don't think it's the one that I want to work in right now. I want to work in Android 11 because this is the most common one to date. The one we're working with now. Okay, so please make sure you have that ready to go. Okay, any other questions around OS version? Because this is kind of an important beginner step before we move on to the next part. Next, Android SDK is one thing, but notice there's a couple of tabs up here, okay? And also, Android SDK location is going to be, if you notice, in users, your name, app data, local, Android, SDK. That's where it's going to go. However, you can move this to wherever you want it to go. Although I do not recommend it. I recommend sticking with the this thing. It's going to cut your I would say complexity to build down. Okay, that's one thing that I want you to do. Next, SDK tools. If you look at SDK tools, I have version 30, 31, and 33 installed. Okay, that's the build tools. I don't recommend anything else. I think these are the ones that are just fine. Notice I did not have 32 installed, but again, if I go to 32, right, as an example, this is like, you know, the API 32. If I was going to install, you know, Android version 32, which I'm not doing, okay? However, if I go back to the tools, 30 and 31 are there, right? That's the latest build. If I'm going to build my application, and they're different. SDK build tools 33 is the latest version, and this is very different than the SDK platforms. SDK platforms and SDK tools, two different things, right? So you want to stick with 33, 31, and 30, and that's enough. Okay? Best case or worst case scenario in terms of the stuff you want to install. Anything beyond this is a waste. Okay? Sdk update sites is if you had additional SDK update sites that you wanted to use. Sometimes people use custom SDK update sites if they want to use a special version of Android. Proprietary version, and there might be another one that you might include if you're working for a company. For example, if you had your own update site that you'd have in there, you could have your own SDK. Okay, for us, not required, and so we're just going to stick with the SDK platforms right here. This, like I said, takes a bit of you know, kind of processing to do. And so again, appearance, mine is Darkula. Menus and toolbars, you can customize as normal. I'm not going to go into all this kind of stuff too crazy. There's other tools here that you can see here. The emulator one is, it says launch in a tool window if I want the emulator. I'm going to talk about the emulator here because I've never been happy with the emulator that comes bundled with you know, Android Studio. I'm going to be honest. It's improved a hell of a lot. Okay. So a little bit of history in terms of emulators and why we need them. Remember, we're building a mobile application with Java, right? So we need to test it out, if you think about it, on some kind of device or an emulator, okay? And there's a difference between an emulator and a simulator, okay? For example, iOS, when we're building iOS applications, if we ever do that together, right, we use a simulator. And it's kind of a little app that runs inside of Xcode, for example, if we're, and you need a Mac to do it, okay? We're not going to do that now, but let's suppose we were thinking about doing that. That's simulating what it would look like if the app was running. An emulator runs inside of a virtual machine, okay? So you need virtualization set up on your machine in order for you to run an emulator properly, okay? And a couple things to note is you can set up your virtual device manager. Notice it says virtual device manager here. And notice here, I do not have any virtual devices set up. You can certainly create them. And the way you would do that is I would click create device. It's going to ask me what type of device I want to create. And I've left this for us to do it together because I want to talk about it a little bit. Okay. It talks about a couple things here when you create a device. On the left, it says the device that you want to install, all right? And it has several different devices. What we want is something that is going to approximate, you know, a fairly new cell phone, right? Something like that's at least 1440, you know, by something like this, a Nexus 6 or something like that. Because once we go with an older phone that's like, I don't know, something really old, like something really small like this, those devices don't really exist anymore. I mean, you can find them, but you know, we don't want to definitely not program for them. And you can also create your own. Okay, you can also create your own. The challenge here, when I look at this little list, is it doesn't give you a whole lot of selections, right? You have to kind of make your own. So notice these are the hardware profiles, and it talks about here the if I'm just leaving at the pixel 2, the size, which is large, the ratio, which is long, and the density, which is the pixel density of your screen, and you know, kind of the size in terms of how large it is. You can of course make your own. If I click new hardware profile, you can decide on what the device name is going to be, right? So, right? Okay. So you can decide what the device is going to be, right? And you can decide on the resolution and the screen size. So let's suppose, and this is why it's important to do together. So let's suppose I want to make a brand new phone that I want to describe. And I want to do something like the Samsung Galaxy, I'm just going to give you a real phone, S10 Plus. Okay, that's the one I want. Let's do that. So if I look up the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, right? You know, specs. Let's look at that. Okay. If I look up that, you know, this thing, here's the full phone specifications. If I did that, it talks about the body dimensions and the build and the display. So the display, look at the size. It says 6.4 inches, right? 6.4 inches. We can take this information, and if I go in here to this, our size, I want to make it 6.4. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm doing, right? So here you can see that this suddenly becomes 6.4 inches. The resolution is the next important thing, and the resolution says 1440 by 3040. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there, 1440 by 3040, which makes it a very long, large kind of phone. That's what it's going to be looking like. Take a look. Okay, so this is what you'd want to do. Okay, RAM. Okay, I don't recommend anything less than 4096, so 4 gigabytes. Now, here's something that I want you to think about. Why am I allocating 4 gigabytes of RAM? Because we want to have the capabilities of running any app we want. Okay, that's kind of where I'm going with this one. And it says input has hardware buttons, back, home, and menu, has hardware keyboard. No, we're not going to use those. Navigation style, D-pad, trackball, and wheel. You can select those things. Let's name this thing Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Okay, I just want to show you this. And there's portrait, landscape. It supports those orientations. That's what those are. Cameras, both back-facing and front-facing camera, accelerometer, gyroscope, GPS, proximity sensor, and default skin. Notice it says there's a Galaxy Nexus, and we're just going to say no default, no skin. Okay, and there you have it for your profile. Your SDK components are still downloading. No problem, no problem. You do what you have to do, Aditya. I'm recording this thing for you. All right, but here notice that there is a very simple, you know, kind of hardware profile. I'm going to click Finish, and when I do that, right, you're going to see that my Samsung Galaxy should appear here at the top. That's the one I just created, right? And that is the most reasonable type that you want. You want to get kind of a more modern phone than some of these ones that are listed here. Okay, so this is the one that I want to use. Right, and I'm going to click on, if I ever want to modify this, I can edit the device. Again, I can go back here. So look where it went back to 1536. I said I want 4096, not 1536. It says total number of physical pixels on the screen when adding support for multiple screens. Applications do not work directly with resolution. Applications should be concerned with only screen size and density as specified by the generalized size and density of groups within pixels. Okay, it's just you know, kind of looking at, if I click on any one of these things, that's what it does, right? So again, really important to get it right. Okay, that's what it does right there. Okay, next, notice it says Play Store, which is kind of interesting. Here, there's no Play Store installed. but I want to click next for this one. And it says, okay, so the next part is, what do I want to install on it? Well, it looks like 11 has been selected for me, which is what I'm thinking. So I'm almost like creating a virtual phone, and this is the one that I want to install. I want to install an API level 30, which is going to emulate what I want. Okay, it says a system image must be selected. I'm selecting a system image, and then that's the recommended one, and it says download. So I'm going to download that image. It's going to take time, 620 megs worth of time. All right. Now your connection might be slower or faster than mine, and if it is, awesome. But you can see that it's going to take some time for this to happen. And this is part of our process today. I'm going to kind of click away. By the way, for the Samsung Galaxy that I downloaded, here's the link. So you guys have that same link later on if you get to it after I've done this. I'm just going to close this off for now. Actually, I'll keep it open. So let's go back to that installation step right here. Okay, so notice that it's finished. I'm going to click finish. There we go. And here is my Android, my R, which is what I've downloaded. I'm clicking next, right? And it says Samsung Galaxy S10 API 30 is what the AVD name is called. That's the Android virtual device. That's what that is. You can see what this is. It says by startup orientation, I'm starting up as portrait. So it's up and down, not side to side. Okay. Emulated performance graphics is automatic, right? I can hardware accelerate it if I want to, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it as automatic. And then I can also show advanced settings for this. And if I do that, it tells me the front is emulated. The back is a virtual scene, the back camera, right? And you can see that it also starts off, even though I told it to start off with 4096, it started off with something weird. I'm going to put in 4096. That's up here. I'm going to force it to this. I recommend 4 gigabytes. But like I said, even if I click finish, it's going to do what it's going to do. And then once we have this, my Android Galaxy, Samsung Galaxy S10 API 30, then if I click this plus button, this play button, then if everything goes well, it should start. It's that simple. But we need an SDK. Sorry, we need the an emulator like this. Because without the emulator, we can't see our, the fruits of our labor. Our application won't run. Now, this is what's happening. You can see that it's going to start, and it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take its time, sweet time, actually. Now, on different systems, this will take shorter or longer periods. But this is where the it'll simulate what it looks like for, the API to come up. I'm going to give you another recommendation, right? Okay, there we go. So there's the API. Again, not so bad in terms of how it works and everything else. And this is simulating what a phone would be like for the most part. Okay. A couple things that you're going to have here is, again, if you look, I can kind of change the orientation of the phone, right? I can keep doing that upside down and all this kind of stuff. That's allowing me to move things around. I can turn the phone off and on. I can turn the sound volume up and down. I can take a screenshot. I can zoom in and out, all this kind of stuff. I can even make this phone, kind of expand this part or not as I like. So it's pretty straightforward. So we need this first, because without this, my friends, then we won't have a target for our application. You need this part as well. So please, if you haven't had a chance to install this, install something like this. This is one option, okay? I'm going to give you another one. I'm going to give you another one of these. So the other option, okay, the other option that I want to give you instead of this, and by the way, if I want to kind of power it down, or I want to, turn it off, I want to close this off, I can close down the emulator altogether, and you can see now it comes back to this. Right? Option 2, which I think is a better option, and I kind of detail it here at the bottom on slide 12, is I recommend Ldplayer. So again, although Android Studio comes with an emulator that you can download, I think Ldplayer is, well, in many ways superior. And let me talk about this and why I think it is this way. All right. One, you can play games with it. Okay, and I'm not because I'm not a game professor and I've done this before. Not because of that reason, but because think about this: if I can play a game with an Android an Android emulator, chances are it'll support almost anything. Okay, that's number one. So let's get to that point. Let's get to ldplayer.net. This is the other option, and you can install both of these. By the way, it's not going to stop you from doing both. Right? Again, they're just more space on your machine, on your laptop or desktop. That's where you're going to go for this one. There's two versions. There's Ldplayer 9 and there's Ldplayer 4. And there's also, you can look at previous versions of Ldplayer that's been here from before. Ldplayer has been around for a long time and I've been using it for, I would say, a few years now. All right. And if we go to Ldplayer, this one, if I go to that right here, you'll see that you can get the latest version of Ldplayer 9. Why Ldplayer and why not something like the emulator that comes with Android Studio? Well, I kind of look at the emulator that comes with Android Studio as like no frills. It's very simple. It'll do what you have to do. It's got a lot of really cool functionality, and sometimes we'll have to go back to it for some features and stuff that are not covered with Ldplayer. But if you want to do something that's more interactive that requires a GPU or something like that, Ldplayer is your friend. And notice that it's really very similar in terms of how you set things up. Let's go and configure Ldplayer. Let's suppose you've downloaded it now. I'm going to run Ldplayer for you and show you the difference. So here's Ldplayer startup. One other thing you can do is you can drag and drop. You can add an APK, an Android package really quickly. Here's my Ldplayer. Now I started it in as an example in landscape orientation, but there's nothing that's going to stop me from putting this in a different orientation to start with, okay? Similar to what we said before. So if I want to rotate the screen, I can totally do it the same way, right? Now, right now, what I've said is that my phone or the thing that I'm emulating is a custom, I've kind of set up in a custom manner. Let me just go back to the defaults. So with Ldplayer, there's a couple things you need to do when you first download it. One, notice it says under advanced, there is tablet mode, mobile mode, all right, as an example, ultra wide, okay, and customize. What I've done is I've made the width 3040 and the height 1440. It's exactly the same as the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Here, I'm just going to change it the other way around. So let's suppose I said 1440 for the width and 3040 for the height. Those are the values we're going to use. Doesn't matter which emulator you want to use, okay? So this is the values we're going to use. Notice the RAM recommended is 4096, which is what I was trying to do with you guys, and it's available for you guys as well. It also allows me to use multiple CPU cores. And I can recommend if you have a lot of cores on your CPU, like if you have a latest processor that has multiple cores, if you assign multiple cores to this virtual machine, it'll perform better. All right, so that's one thing it allows you to do. Okay, and from a model perspective, I've chosen, there's a bunch of preset models, and if you note here, if I go down to Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, it's right there, it's ready to go. So I can download a model that's kind of fairly reasonable and modern, right? I can also set a higher frame rate, 90 frames per second if I want to, to play games. It'll also accept things like input from keyboard and mouse, so it'll simulate, input from that as well. And you can set up audio, network, shortcuts, and wallpaper of whatever wallpaper you want, right? Under other settings, though, the one thing I need you guys to do, so definitely in advance, we want to change this to customize in this part, right? But the other stuff you can leave alone. I mean, model, you'd have to select the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, this model here, which will configure everything. So it says Samsung as the manufacturer, and it'll give you a simulated IMEI, which is like what the phone would have, all right? But here at the other settings area, what you want to do is you want to use ADB debugging, and you want to switch it to open local connection. Okay, this is the one you want. When you've done this, If you click Save Settings, it'll ask you to restart your Ldplayer, and when you do, clickety-click, it'll look exactly like the other emulator that we had before. But great thing is, it'll support, it'd be way better in terms of how it looks and kind of how it feels compared to Android Studio. Okay, so that is what I recommend. It also is connected to the LD Store, which allows you to download and install, if you have a Google Play account, any applications that you can play, any games or whatever that you want to play here. Okay, really great, and for the most part, it works fairly consistently. All right, so this is the second emulator that I recommend. Okay, questions around this one, or anyone have any thoughts? Remember, if it supports games, chances are it's going to support any UI that you want to build. Okay, that's the idea behind it. What are your thoughts, guys? I'm going to be using this one. I'm going to be using, Ldplayer for the most part. But it really doesn't matter what you feel comfortable doing. You do what you feel comfortable doing. Okay. All right. So again, really great in terms of CPU and GPU usage. When I think about this, now it does use a little bit more resources. So we always got to talk about positives and negatives. There's no silver bullet, all right, when it comes to this kind of stuff. The best thing you can do, by the way, when it comes to making your Android application is actually using a real phone. Okay, so one thing that you're going to notice is if you try and do this thing on the emulator, it's going to perform okay, but it's never perfect. Okay, I got to talk about this as well. The best performance that you're going to test ever is on real devices. Okay. Now, in some studios, when you're building Android applications, they have a series of devices you can use. But there's also services out there that allow you to tap into live phones online that are there available for you when you're developing your application. Okay. But for today, all we want to do is make sure you have either your Ldplayer installed or a virtual device that's installed through Android Studio, like we did just now. So this one you're here. So I went to Virtual Device Manager and I have my Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Please configure your application for the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, as that's what I will be using for the remainder of semester. Okay? Doesn't matter which one you go with. All right, so now that I've got this piece ready to go, so I've got Ldplayer here, and by the way, I also, like I said, have my actual Android phone connected to my computer. You need to have either one or the other. There must be a target when you're making your application. And if you've downloaded all of your, the SDKs that you need, SDK 30 is what we're using, right? Then if you look here, and I want to make a brand new project. So this is the next step. So let's do a brand new project here, all right? And again, you can see that there are several different templates, all right? Several different templates that you can start off with. Okay, so you can see that there is a basic activity template. Okay, there's a basic activity template. There is a empty compose activity. We'll talk about compose and how that's really cool, and maybe next week. There's also an empty activity as well as a bottom navigation activity. So there's different activities that you can download. Activities are kind of like an intent. That's what we're going to talk about. And each activity, you can see that there's many different ones that are available for you. By the way, you can also build it in native C++ if you like that kind of thing, although I don't recommend it for beginners. Okay, so let's start off today with a basic activity. This one here, not an empty one, but rather a basic one. Okay, this is the one we're going to start off with today. Basic activity. Okay, and then click next. Notice it's a phone and tablet. I'm not choosing Wear OS, Android TV, or automotive. Those are other templates that you can use to start with. I'm going to click next. Next, the name of my application. So we're just going to say this is going to be called ICE9. I'm going to call it that, accordingly. So COMP1011 in the summer of 2022, and it's going to be ICE9. ICE10. Sorry, ICE10. I'll be okay. Now, where the location is going to save, notice it says users, blah, 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 whatever. And look at the package that it comes up with. I kind of have created a first app before. What I want you guys to do is the package name, ca.georgiancollege. I want you to use something similar to this. And the name of the application is going to be appended to this, just like normally when we do our Java application. Next, you have some options for the language that you're going to support. Notice that there is Java and Kotlin. Those are the two options here for this template. We're going to choose Java. Okay. Next, notice that if it says the minimum SDK, this is the minimum that will run on your device, right? You can choose whichever SDK you want, but the higher level SDKs, like for example, API 30, if I choose this, it says that your app will run on approximately 35% of devices. Even though this is the most popular SDK, to make this the minimum level, that means that that's the only one it will run on, is not a good idea. So look, it says where it says help me choose. Help me choose is kind of similar to what we did before when we looked up the most popular one. But notice that it says that if I want to run my device on 95% or 98% of devices, I want to choose a lower version of the SDK, right? So again, what it recommended was something like way back here, like 25 or 26, right? So let's go back to 7, right? Or even lower. So let me just go previous for a second. So let's suppose I chose something else and go next. Notice that it keeps the settings, all right? Just gonna go there and go next. So again, this is something that you want. So the lower one is going to support more, devices. Take a look. If I go to 5.1 or even 5, but don't go too low, because what's going to happen is it's going to have backwards compatibility support for a lot of this stuff. So again, recommendations are something like version 25, something like that, or thereabouts. Version 24, 25 is probably a good version to choose. Okay. Most phones have something like that right now, right? You can see 91%. Okay, it doesn't really matter, but don't go too high is what I'm saying. Don't try and do the latest version, right? You can see like it's 6% of devices, right? And that's why, you want to choose something that's down in here, right? Marshmallow is typically not a terrible choice because it's supported by a lot of devices, API 23, and 95.6% of devices are supported. See, this is the one. Right? And it's not a bad level to start off with. So that's where I'm going to start. Android API 23. Okay, and then I'm going to click Finish. Now, what it's going to do is because I chose Java, and because I chose this API level, right? Then what it's going to do right now is it's still doing its work. Notice it says Gradle project sync in progress. Okay, so that means I can't really do anything right now. I have to wait until this is done. It's going to give you a tip. You can also click this to say, I don't want any more tips, all right, as an example. But we can just close this off and wait. That's what you need to do now. Wait. And we need to wait until this is done. This is kind of like Maven. So Gradle is another package manager similar to Maven. And what it's going to do is it's going to grab, if I go over here, it's going to grab all of our packages that are required and install them inside of your application. So right now, notice it says our project is loading. Guys, there's nothing for you to do at this point. You need to wait. And this can take some time. How are you guys doing in terms of everything else? Notice it says Gradle, configure progress, build model down here. Are we doing okay? Okay, at this point for me, right, I finished in 1 minute, 19 seconds on my machine. Your machine may take longer or shorter. It's up to you. Okay, while you're doing this, I'm going to suspect that you're not finished yet. Let's go step back a little bit. So again, what's Android? Mobile operating system. do I prefer Xcode for devs or Kotlin? Xcode, you mean you're talking about for iOS, right? And for iOS, Xcode is the only thing you can do, really, at the end of the day. I mean, really, there is no other application development platform when you're developing iOS applications for Apple iPhones, okay? And you need a Mac. There's no other way around that. You can't develop outside of a Mac. I mean, not realistically. Could you build your own Hackintosh? You probably could still. I don't recommend it, especially now with Apple Silicon. It's really put a lot of stuff in the mix. But for developing, which do I prefer? Honestly, I have to tell you that Android is a lot simpler. iOS is far more complex because there's a lot of things to note. I've done it. I've done both to some extent or another. And if I was going to program an application, and if I was going to make it on most phones, then Android would be the way to go. iOS devices, there is a barrier to entry for iOS, and this is what I don't prefer. Apple makes it very proprietary, right? Android development you can do on any device. You can do it on a Linux device. You can do it on a Mac, on a Windows machine, no problem. But for Apple devices, you must have a Mac. You must use Xcode, and you have to have some kind of phone eventually to test with. So we're talking about a lot of barrier to entry. To become a developer on the Apple side, it costs $100 US approximately to sign up as a developer. To sign up as a developer for Android, it costs $25, right? So, and it's a one-time thing. The Apple thing is $100 a year. Every single year, you have to really commit to being a developer. Apple uses the Swift programming language primarily for programming. You can do it with C++. You can do it in other ways as well. For example, Objective-C, which is the older version of the language that you're going to use to develop iOS devices. But from an Android perspective, it's Java or Kotlin. Java is very popular. People know how to program with it. And Kotlin is like a Java plus. It's kind of like almost like Kotlin's is Android's answer to Swift, in many ways. And in fact, if anything, it's really straightforward, as we're going to see next semester, when we do that. So do I prefer iOS or Android development? I think it's easier to do it in Android. However, I also have to tell you, this is a complex answer. It's not so straightforward. If you're going to make money, right, we got to talk about money making too. Kuhen, I would say Apple developer makes more money than Android developers, right? Because they're more in demand. There's a lot of Android developers out there because it's so easy to get into the market to actually do Android or iOS, mobile development. But when it comes to actual developing, it's harder to do an iOS application. Even though if you talk to the Apple folks, you go to the Apple store, you're like, I want to build apps. They're going to say, oh yeah, it's so easy. And then you're actually going to start doing it and you're like, wow, this is not easy. It's not easy at all. It's very complex, right? So to me, it's a kind of a two-edged sword. There's positives and negatives. One thing to note is most people gravitate towards one mobile application development platform or another, but not everyone can do both. Because remember, all the technologies you need to know about. You need to know about, building user interfaces. You need to know about Java or Kotlin on one, and then Swift on the other. And you must own a Mac, which is a huge barrier to entry right there. Because again, Macs cost a couple $1,000 at the minimum. Plus, you need to have, all this other stuff, Xcode. You need to know how to use a Mac. It's very, very different than Windows. And so that is another thing, right? But if I was going to tell you, if your goal was to become a mobile developer, I would say get a Mac, because then you can do both, right? If you're a Windows person, you might be like, I don't want a Mac, right? I'm never going to use anything on a Mac. But if you're going to be a mobile developer, the Mac is your friend. It's actually easier to develop Android applications on a Mac than it is on a Windows machine. And you'll see that if you ever have a Mac. And the reason for this is because it's just so much straightforward to connect to your application and everything else. I find just mobile development in general just easier on a Mac than on a Windows machine. However, all that being said, choosing one over the other, Android is just far easier. So as a beginner, I'd probably start with Android. And then, once I understand how to build a mobile application, the processes And kind of the way things are working in on the Android system is very similar to how it's going to work on an iOS device. So you can kind of transfer some of those skills. That's the long answer. I'm sorry. It's not a straightforward answer, is the answer. However, let me tell you this. If I was going to tell you about IDEs, which IDE I prefer over all the other ones, I mean, I'll tell you that if I could program on an Android or iOS with Visual Studio, like the one on Windows, I'd be happier than ever, right? Because I'll tell you, Xcode's terrible for me. I don't like it. I've used it for many years, and it's far worse than Android Studio. Our Android Studio is okay. Xcode is just difficult, and Visual Studio is awesome, in terms of the way it works. Visual Studio Code, I would say, is my number two. Sometimes it's my number one, depending on what I'm doing, especially if I'm programming JavaScript, TypeScript stuff on the web. I use Visual Studio Code far, far more often than Visual Studio. Okay. Does that answer your question? I know it's a lot of answers, but anyways. Okay. All right. Thank you for your patience. So let's go back to this. Android, mobile application, operating system. It's for Android devices primarily. You hate Visual Studio. No, don't do it. Don't say that. That's not true. Microsoft makes awesome tools. If they're good at everything, anything, they're really great at tools making. All right. They might be bad in some other ways. Like, for example, the operating system. Windows 10 probably was the most, I would say, most stable until Windows 11 came out for a long, long time. But compared to Mac has just been solid. Windows is more prone to viruses because it's more targeted than Mac. Mac almost never gets a virus and all that kind of stuff as well. In terms of speed, dollars for dollar, I would say you can get a lot of speed out of a machine that's a Windows machine now compared to the old Macs, the Intel-based Macs. But you know what? The M1s and the M2s that have just come out are pretty awesome in terms of the performance that you're going to get, especially if you don't care about games. If you're a game player, then a Windows machine is for you. And that's where Microsoft's awesome. Well, you know what? You just got to get used to it. And I think the UI experience for Visual Studio, there's a lot of support for Visual Studio. Whereas Xcode, man, you'll see if you ever, I'm not sure if you ever used Xcode, but to me, Xcode is a dog's breakfast. It's something that's been kind of, evolved over the last little while. It used to be a mix of interface builder and something else. And then they smashed it together and make the new Xcode. So I kind of like it and I kind of don't like it. And it's kind of a love-hate relationship that I have with Xcode. And I always talk about that with my students when I do iOS development with them. All right, let's go back to this though. So Java was the premier language for Android, right? But now Kotlin is very common and it's definitely on the rise. And the reason why Kotlin is on the rise is there's a couple of different political reasons. One of them is Oracle. And I kind of talked about this with you earlier this semester. Oracle owns Java, right? And at one point when, history-wise, when Android was being developed, the people who were managing Java at the time sent a little email to the people who were developing Android, that's Google, and said, "Hey, Google, it's okay. We're really happy that you chose Java as your language, and you can use Java for Android development, and that's really cool. We're really happy with you if you do that. It's open source. Go ahead." And that's all that Google really had is an agreement. That's it, just that email, right? And then, Oracle came along and scooped up Java, the whole platform and stuff, and they developed it and they own it now. So there's all these rights, and they went across to Google and said, "Google, guess what? We want you to stop using Java unless you pay us." And Google's like, "What? We have this email from the original, custodians of Java, and they say we can use this, in perpetuity. They told us it was okay to use, and that's why we developed our Android system." And when they took this to court, that's all they had, just an email and good intent. So the intent was that, hey, you can use it. But Oracle really was pressuring them to move on. And what they've done is they've come together and they've talked about a transition. And you're going to see that Google eventually will transition completely away from Java. over a course of time, and they've kind of gone to JetBrains, the people who made Android Studio, and JetBrains, they've developed their own language, Kotlin, and that is going to be the way it's going to go in the future. In fact, if anything, Kotlin development is the way to go when we do Android development. Now, here in our course, because we're OOP with Java, we're going to stick with Java this semester. Next semester, if we get together and if I have you guys, we'll do Kotlin from the very beginning, okay? And that's how we'll do it. And I think we're going to have a really interesting journey and time with that. But that's how it's going to be for, for Android development. Okay, but Kotlin is becoming very common. I would say Kotlin is probably in many ways more popular nowadays as we're moving in. Java has some limitations. Java has some quirks that we've seen already this semester, and Kotlin is much more flexible and quick. All right, and we're going to see the difference. Again, we won't do it this semester because that'll be spoilers. All right, so let's go to how do they work together. So we talked about this before. What we do is we write some program in Java for Android. We're going to see that. We click a button and bam, it's transformed into bytecode. And of course, this is called compiling. We compile it into bytecode. Bytecode, of course, is translated by another process known as the Android runtime, or the ART, into machine code. And this is the fastest possible execution format. Doesn't matter whether you're doing it with Kotlin or C++ or whatever you're going to choose as a language. The great thing is it all gets converted to machine code, and so it's equally fast. If someone's going to tell you that Kotlin is faster than Java or C++ is faster than Java, it's not true, because at the end of the day, it needs to convert to machine code, and the process of doing that and creating your Android runtime is the same. Okay, so that's something different than iOS. iOS, you can get some really good speed out of Swift, but you might get better performance and sometimes if you just do it in straight C++, right? So that's kind of interesting as well. So again, just talking about Java a little bit. Does anyone program in C++ for Android and for iOS devices? I would say the majority not. That's not true. It's very rare, that people do that, and it's usually if they want to program some kind of hardware acceleration based something that they want to connect to a driver for a new phone, something like that just does not exist, or if they're just a C++ programmer that just likes to do things manually. It's very rare, but for the most part, Kotlin is the way to go for most programmers, or Java. Okay, in this case, we're going to do Java. So that's how it works together. Android is a collection of subsystems, so it's not just one thing. The architecture itself, one thing to note is it's based upon the Linux kernel. All right, so a kind of modified version of the Linux kernel, and it's pretty secure in terms of how the way it works. And really, the Linux part is there to hide the complexity and the diversity of the hardware that Android is on. So this is a difference again between Android and iOS. Android works on all Android devices for the most part. Okay, so lots of diversity out there. Not every device is the same. You can get older devices that run Android from different manufacturers. iOS, not so. It's very, it's one. It's either an iPhone or an iPhone. You don't have much of a choice, right? Only Apple makes, devices that run iOS. No other manufacturer is allowed to do that. Okay, right at this point, right? And here's the other thing that happens. Most people upgrade to the latest version of iOS pretty much within the first little while. It doesn't take long. It's like they abandon the previous operating system and they move to the newest one, right? Because it's super compatible, number one, okay? However, I have to mention the tricks that the Apple people do. And I'm going to say it as tricks because it is what it is. I'm just going to give my personal opinion. I've been using Apple devices now for many, many years, since the first iPhone came out. And I have to tell you, as soon as that new iOS, kind of platform comes out, let's say, for example, iOS whatever version, put the version in, suddenly it feels a little laggy on the old iPhone, right? And, and you want to go to the newest version because they have all these new features and lovely things that you've been missing from your old version. But as soon as you install it, it's a little bit laggy. And what they want you to do, of course, is upgrade to the latest iPhone. That's their kind of spiel, the way they do things and everything else. And that's kind of a negative, right? Android, not so. I mean, you can use, the latest version of the platform. Now, there's some older phones that just don't support it, right? As an example anymore. But for the most part, I mean, my Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus can last a long time, right? Oh yeah, they did all kinds of stuff before Kuhan. So they did not just throttling. It's like almost like they made an excuse. They said, well, we have to do this because if we don't, we're gonna kill the battery. That's what their excuse was for throttling. And so at the end of the day, now you're going to see the latest phones that are going to be released. And by the way, their development cycle. Apple has a very specific development cycle. They have the WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference. Usually happens in June timeframe. And then what they do is they announce their new version of iOS, watchOS, iPadOS, tvOS, and all these other OSs, right? That's what they do. And then what they do is they come up with all the new hardware in the fall. So usually the new hardware comes out, new iPhones, all that kind of stuff is available in the fall. And what did they want you to do? Why is it the fall? Back to school. They want you to buy the latest version of the iPhone. They want you to buy a brand new laptop, right? You're probably going to get money, because if you're a student, they're targeting a lot of this stuff to students as well. And what happens is they want to push everyone to the latest version of iOS. And they also, what they've started doing is some of the older phones, example, older than iPhone 6, if I'm not wrong, iPhone 6S, you can't run the latest version of iOS on it. You can only run iOS 13 or something like that. So that's kind of how it works with development. You have iPhone pushes you to get the latest and greatest all the time. They continue to force you to, to move, forward with their I would say the cult of Mac, if you will. And Android doesn't do that, right? So that's something that it's, again, very open source, very user-friendly. And the right to repair. Yeah, that's also something else that's coming up, right? They've been challenged lately. Remember, because and Apple devices are like, hey, this is proprietary stuff. You have no right to open it up. You open up an Apple phone, you void the warranty. Right, potentially. And that's been fought over the last couple of years, I would say. And there's been some things. There's lots of shops that have opened up that says here iPhone repair or smartphone repair, and they can replace the glass for you. They can replace the all kinds of parts are available now, third party, by the way, that you can do that with. And but again, a lot of times. They won't support it. Your best bet if you're buying an iPhone is go back to Apple if you have a problem and get them to do the work for you, and then you don't void anything. All right, and you're not going to fight with them about who owns what. Apple Care is actually really recommended, not because I want to sell iPhone products, because I'll tell you, I've broken many an iPhone, and some of them like falling into the snow, falling into the toilet, falling into the lake, a lot of water damage. Breaking screens, very, very common. Walking down the stairs, trying to, answer an email, and boop, it just falls out of my hands and smashes on the stairwell. Lots of stuff like that happens. Leaving it somewhere, losing the iPhone, getting it stolen, lots of stuff. And an Apple Care takes care of all of that. One thing to note is, if I was compare the two platforms in terms of support, you can't get better support than Apple. Honestly, you really can't, right? It's really great. And you pay for it. You really do pay for it. Compared to Android. If you lose your Android phone, oh well. I mean, you might be able to get it back from your credit card, or if you buy a warranty through your provider, yes, there's ways of getting it back as well, and there's lots of support for that as well. And if you call Samsung, you may get okay support. I've never really gotten great support from Samsung or LG or any of those providers. They're especially LG. But Apple rises above the rest in terms of support. So that's where the difference is between Android and iOS. So Linux, this is a great thing. Linux is actually the kernel for both, right? I mean, there's a Linux kernel on the iOS, iOS phones. There's a Linux kernel on an Android device. It's just more proprietary on iOS. It's a Linux kernel that runs on your Mac, right, for your Mac OS, and so on as well. So they have some basic compatibility things that they have between the two, but you can never ever run an iOS application on a Mac. On an Android device, and you can't typically run Android applications on an iOS device. You got to download the iOS app or the Android app. So again, one thing that it does is Linux exposes features, hardware features. That's what it does, and it creates a programmer-friendly and easy-to-use interface for us to use Android. That's what Linux is for. Okay, more than anything else. There's a bunch of Java code that's included with Android, the Android API that allows us to get a quick start on and get moving. And we write our own Java code like before. And again, the bytecode that gets converted when we compile, as a good example, is placed in a bundle of files called, this is really key, an Android application package or an APK. And this APK and is what the Android runtime uses to run and prepare our app for the user. That's what it does. By the way, one more thing about Android. Android is the platform that a lot of the most popular VR device, the Meta Quest, or usually previously called the Oculus Quest, uses as its baseline, right? So it's a customized version of Android operating system. So one great thing you can do is you can create your own VR application and port it over to the Oculus Quest, Meta Quest, which is pretty cool. And in the same way, you would build an application for an Android device, which is pretty cool. All right, so that's something to note as well. So that is what the Android API looks like. And like I said, we downloaded it from developer.android.com/studio, and it's based on the community version of IntelliJ. I also recommended Emulator as Ldplayer. And let's get into what it looks like when we actually deploy it here. So here I've downloaded and installed everything by using Gradle. So I've just kind of created an application. Notice that I have my Java library, my Java folder, and inside there now I have, instead of 2 like we had for our regular Java application, I have 3. Okay, I have 3. And there's also a resources folder here as well. So there's a resources folder, a Java folder, and a bunch of subfolders. So one is this one, the first one, which gives me my first fragment, my main activity, and my second fragment. Okay, I'll talk about that in a second. And the second and third one are test projects that you can use, test frameworks that we can use to test our application. We're not going to do that this semester. Okay, so we're not going to touch these. We're going to mostly work here. In the resources or the res folder, right here, we have a bunch of things in here as well. And one of them is the layout. And you can see that very similar to Fxml. Notice it says XML, right? And if I go to the activity main XML layout and double click, you can see that we're going to get in a second an XML file. And there's 2 ways to look at this thing, all right? You can look at this thing as our layout. Okay, this is one thing. This is why it looks the way it does. This is our layout. Okay. And you can see that I have our activity main. That's what it is. So I double click on first fragment. And here now I have access, as an example, to my button. I have access to my label and all that kind of stuff. So why am I showing you this? Because typically when we first open an application, and if you've never used Android Studio before, right, one thing that you're going to notice is that, and by the way, you may not see it this way, on the top right, and this is just a bit of a tour of Android Studio, on the top right, you may also see these as code, like this. Okay, this is the code view. So notice that this is the XML view of your fragment. And if I go back to my activity, right, and if I click code, then you can see that this is the code view, the XML view of your activity main. So this is where the design is set up. And this is very similar to our Fxml. Very, very similar. Okay. However, it's more simplified in many ways as well. Okay, take a look here. So what you have here is you have our header, which is our app bar layout. Inside there, you have a widget, which is our toolbar, and that's what our activity looks like. I want you to think about the activity, if you think about this, the activity itself, as the container for the two fragments. You have a fragment that is the first fragment, and you have a fragment that is the second fragment. Each fragment, as an example, let's just go back to, if I go here and I go to code, each fragment is in many ways a screen, right? That's what it is. That's our layout. So we contain each of the fragments. So the activity itself, I'm just going to go back to design for a second. The activity itself is going to present whatever fragment is current. Think about this as almost like a container for an object that we're going to have that's going to be displayed. So the activity itself is the container. The fragment is where the content is going to be. And if I go back to fragment and at fragment first, and if I look at design, again, you can see here I have the ability for me to drag and drop different common items like a button, like an image view, like a recycler, like a bunch of other stuff. It also can specify different kinds of buttons that I want to put in widgets. You can see that this is something that I can do, right? And that is the way we start off. We start off, and this is something contra to what we would normally do in Java, is we already start off with all the XML documents we require. Okay, this is number one. And what we want to start off with this template is I want to, if I want to modify anything, I can drag and drop UI elements right in here. There's no need for a second application, like for example, Scene Builder. I don't need Scene Builder or anything else. I do everything right in Android Studio, and this is pretty darn good in terms of development flow. Our application, let's just go back to our main activity here. Just again, we're just doing a tour of this one. If I go back to my main activity here, and if I start off, then I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see, that, well, here's our kind of our application. You can see here that we have our a couple of methods. And one of the first methods you're going to notice is you have our main activity, and our main activity extends a app compat activity. App compat activity. All right, that's what it does. We have a bunch of imports that we already have set up for you. So the Android OS bundle, as well as the material snack bar. Okay, that's what that is. As well as a nav controller, a navigation, a bunch of UI elements that we have here, as well as a menu and a menu item. So that's what the import is there for. And notice here, when we first come out, the first thing we have here is an onCreate. There's our onCreate method. And this, my friends, is the first method of our Android application lifecycle. Okay, let me get back to this in a second, because I don't want to do anything until we talk a little bit about what this does. So you're not completely, kind of in the cold about how this all works. Back to our PowerPoint. So really, every app on the Android device is in one of the following phases, which is either the app is being created. Okay, so if I launch it, it's starting. Okay, it's resuming, it's running, it's pausing, it's stopping, or it's being destroyed. One of those phases is happening. And this is a very high-level overview of the Android application lifecycle. Okay, and let's talk about the onCreate method that we just saw. So here's onCreate, right? There's onCreate right here. This is the one. onCreate is our, I would say, our de facto standard default required, if you will, lifecycle function that we need. Okay, notice because we're in main activity, onCreate says this is going to trigger, and I think the key word here is on. It reminds me a lot of times of an event. And in many ways, that's what these are. These are little application events that trigger at different time phases of the app. So when the app is created, onCreate will initialize. It will run almost like a constructor function. That's what it does. Okay, so again, it's very running with, kind of programming in Android is kind of a subsystem or subset of Java. You're not going to use Java the way you remember it back when we were doing our main and Fxml. Not exactly, right? This is our entry point. Our main activity in this particular case is our entry point for the entire application. That's how it works right now. It doesn't have to, but this is where we're doing it right now with this template. Okay, next. we have our super Oncreate. Super Oncreate, what it does is it's calling the super class of the main activity, the app compat activity, this one, and it's passing in our saved instance state back to the super class. Okay, and this is required. So this piece, this right here is, it just passes our, almost like our event bundle back to the superclass. We have a binding that we do, and we're using a UI inflator or a layout inflator, kind of class. And what this allows us to do is take our main activity and we can inject it inside of our, kind of this little function right here, this class. Okay. There's other things that are included here that we may not need. Our content view, our action bar, and a bunch of other stuff, even our nav controller. These things here are part of this template. And what we'll do next week is we'll start off with an easier, template, or a very much simpler template than this one. We also have this fab, all right? So this is a floating button. That's what this really is. And notice we have a set on click listener event. Oh, very similar to what we've seen before in our Java applications last week in ICE 9 when we were together, right? And what we're doing here, if you notice that there is a built-in on-click handler that's part of the set on-click listener, all right? So this is kind of like, if you think about this, an anonymous, function that we're overriding, the on-click function of the button, right? That's what it is, the action button. So a floating action button is what a fab is, right? And notice it says snackbar.make a new view. We make everything is a view in Android. Everything is a view, right? And it says replace with your own action. That's what the snack bar does. When I click on the button, it's going to make a little pop-up equivalent that's going to say, replace with your own action, whatever that action happens to be. And that's what the Oncreate method does. Okay, so the Oncreate method includes this. And what we also want to do is we want to think about how some of this is done. Notice that we are also using down in here where we have our Oncreate options menu, on options item selected. We have an options option menu, as well as the support navigate up. So there's a bunch of other overrides that are not part of the lifecycle, but are definitely part of the API. Okay. So Oncreate is kind of our central way of pretty much doing everything, and this is where everything starts, in the Oncreate method. Okay. And notice here what we're doing is we're saying something like r.id.navHostFragment content main, and it's giving us a bunch of extra stuff here. And when you look at this for the first time, you're like, what the heck is all this stuff, right? What is all this stuff? And how does it work? How does the navigation controller work? And how does it include our fragment and so on? Okay, so that's what this does. So that is main activity. Let's run it. And what I want you guys to do now is you can target any one of these running devices that you have. Notice that this one here is my actual device. And here it says available devices is my Samsung Galaxy S10 API 30, right? So this is not running. This is running. This is available right here. So this is what you'll see here. So I'm going to try and target my running device, which is on my Ldplayer here. Okay, this is my Ldplayer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my Ldplayer, which is my Samsung G975N, that one. And the way I know that that's the one is if I go to my Ldplayer and I click on this little hexagon settings button, then you can see if I go to the model, it says that exact thing, G975N. That is my model. Again, in order for me to make this work, a couple things to note if you're using Ldplayer is you must have this set up as custom. I recommend model should be set up properly here, and in other settings you must have ADB debugging turned on, open local connection. The rest is all defaulted. Once you have this, then I can target this device. I'm going to start with my Ldplayer because this is what I'm going to go with. And again, what we're looking for from an activity perspective, if I look at the activity design, we're looking for our application to run just like this, where it says hello first fragment. That's what it's going to say, hello first fragment. Okay, and let's run it and see what happens. I'm going to click the little run button, which is going to build my APK for my device. Let's do it. Okay, and I want you guys to do this too. This is part of your in-class exercise 10. And we'll take a short break soon. So it takes time, all right? Now again, in terms of hardware, I have 64 gigs of RAM. I have an i9 10900K, right? So Intel processor. And I have a RTX 3070 in terms of my GPU, right? So my system is okay in terms of how I'm running things, right? If you're running on a laptop or if you're running on another device that's got lesser specs, it might take longer or shorter, depending on how your device has been optimized. Let's see how this works. So you can see that it's building too many FPS. 240, how about that? No problem. I can guarantee you 240, 250 FPS, no problem. When I'm running chess, no problem. You can see at the bottom here that our Gradle build running is happening. And as soon as that's done, it's going to say Gradle build finished, right? Gradle build finished. And it's running now. And to prove it to you, I'm going to go to my Ldplayer. And you can see, just like we said before, look here, hello first fragment. There it is. We have our little fab, our floating access button, which is right here. And we have this little next button. So if I click the next button, it's going to take us to the second fragment. And on the top, notice that there is a navigation bar that's up at the top here. If I click the little back button, it's going to take us back to the first fragment. Okay. If I click on this little fab button, it's going to say replace with your own action, just like we said, right? That's what this does. Replace with your own action. Okay. And it floats this floating action button, right? What it does is it's floating over both fragments. Okay. So if I go to the next, notice it's here. If I go to previous, it's still here. So what's happening is this is part of the activity. This is part of the main activity, where each fragment is totally different. Okay. Also, there is this little ellipses where if I go to settings, and of course right now it doesn't do anything, the settings ellipses, it's not programmed to do anything. If I go to next, it's still there. Okay, this is kind of our basic setup for everything else that we have. Okay. So I'm also going to stop Ldplayer. Let's stop. First of all, one thing that I love about Ldplayer is on the top, you can see that I have my tab, this little tab. I can just shut this tab down and there it is, right? Nice and easy, super easy and everything else. If I want to delete my app, I can just click on it, drag it, and I put it right into my trash bin there, and it will delete my application from Ldplayer, no problem. Okay, I'm going to shut down Ldplayer for now. Let's shut it down. Oh, I didn't mean to restart it. I meant to shut it down. One sec. That's just my bad. And I'm going to run the same application on your built-in player. All right. So let's just run. Sorry, let me shut this down. Now, why am I shutting it down? It's a VM. Running multiple VMs on a machine, probably not a good idea. All right. For a bunch of reasons, just in terms of resources, even for me. Okay. So I want to launch my application. Now up here, notice where it says Device Manager here in Android Studio. There's a little button up here, Device Manager. It looks like a little, kind of phone. So it's built in. Once you've set up your device here, Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, right? I can run it. Let's run it here. So I'm going to run the emulator, right? And it's going to do something very interesting, which, as an example, you can see that it's going to try and run it right inside of Android Studio. Okay. Now, this is the advantage, and we're going to talk about advantage and disadvantage. Here, you can see that I've got my device manager. I can close it off. I can minimize this or whatever. I can bring it back up. There it is, right? But here, notice that I've got my Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, and it's kind of in here, right? This is the emulator. Okay. Observations. What are your thoughts so far? Emulator's running. What's going on? How come I can't see it? the emulator. Now notice it says that, right? It's taking forever, right? So here's power, right? I can turn it on. You have to do that. I have to be honest and tell you that, right? So I'm powered on and off. You have to power it on, right? It's very similar to this. And now if I target this, notice that I can target this one. I've turned off my other one. And if I was to run this app here on the emulator, it's all in one screen. So it's everything in one. So if I click play, and if I target my new Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus right here, then we should get a very similar setup. A couple of advantages, okay, to using this way. One way is it's all built in. So there's nothing for you to, you don't need a separate emulator. It's right here, and it's much improved over the, the first version of Android Studio. Super improved. If you were going to ask me to do this in previous versions of Android Studio, let's say about a year back or 2 years back, I would have been like, no way, I'm going to use something else, right? Because it was super slow here. And running this thing inside of one application like Android Studio, well, it was bad. And prior to Android Studio, we were using Eclipse, which is like maintained by IBM, which is also not so good, right? So this is something that has really improved. Here you can see that I have the same functionality as I did with Android Studio, with Ldplayer, and there's really no difference. But on the downside, right, as an example, I mean, sure, you can, do the same thing, like swipe your app up and have the same functionality as you normally would with an Android device. You can even do a Google search and a bunch of other stuff, right? And just, use it as a, as a kind of, emulating what this looks like, and it's all good. That's Google Maps. Sure, we can do that. There we go. And other things that you can have here as well. But I really rather find, and if you look at the options here, so I have this, right, which is kind of our little test browser, right? That's that one. And we have this, which is kind of our messaging. So it kind of does that. So it's very no frills kind of information about how this all works, right? A gallery of images. Again, you can see how this kind of works out. And it's not wholly terrible. Okay, I'm not going to tell you it's terrible. But like I said, it's super no frills, like no frills. And it really doesn't look in many ways what a normal phone 100% would look like. It can still pull down, has the same functionality that you would have in a phone if you want to configure an Android phone on the top. And if you want to turn on Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or whatever you want to do, those are all good things that are emulated. It even pulls things from the bottom if you want to look for apps or download apps or go to settings. That's what this thing does. But again, I have to tell you that for the most part, I find that, I just prefer the other emulator better. That's just me, right? If I want to turn it off, goodbye, I can turn it off, right? And, we can kind of get out of this as well. So I can kind of turn off the emulator completely, and you can see that that's gone, okay? So it's really up to you what you want to use. The integrated emulator, not a bad idea if you don't have a lot of room on your hard drive, and if you're running just Android Studio, it's a one and done kind of development environment. That's what Android and the folks from JetBrains has done. Really great work, I have to say. I can't say anything negative about it. I'll be honest, again, I recommend this one. Why? It's separate, right? And it's kind of performance optimized. I don't have to do any performance optimizing on my emulator. It's already done for me, right? So there's a lot of steps that have been taken here to make it as realistic as possible. System apps. If I want to look at system apps, I can have it. Here's the Play Store right here, as an example. And I can download whatever I want. I can search for games or other stuff. I can even go to the LD store. And when I do that, I can search for any of the most popular games in here. And for the most part, I mean, depending on what use you're going to make, one or the other is pretty good. Functionality wise, it's identical in many ways. Still have the same buttons here, but we're emulating a phone a little bit faster in many ways than you're doing in the other emulator. also for games, you can't beat it. So if you're a game player, it kind of does the same thing. All right, so that is this. One more I want to talk about because we need to, this is all basic stuff, and then we'll take a short break. One more. There is another emulator that is very popular. There's two actually. Bluestacks. All right, if you want to play, Bluestacks is another emulator that is great for games. All right, it's one of the best ones out there. I would honestly say it's probably just as popular as Ldplayer, or even maybe more popular. Again, I've found some compatibility issues when building for Bluestacks when I'm making games and other things. So sometimes I think it's too games oriented in some ways compared to everything else. That's just me. That's what I've noticed here. So Bluestacks is the other one, and I also have to mention the other one, which is Genymotion. So Genymotion was my other go-to Android emulator for testing and so on. It also offers things like Android as a service, which is very good. They have a very different kind of market than everyone else. Okay, so there's definitely cloud versions that you can download, and there's all the other products as well. Notice that there is some really good stuff that you can use in terms of making Genymotion work for you if you're an app developer. Okay, so kind of really cool in terms of how this works. We can also download a version of an emulator for Genymotion here if you really wanted to. So again, there's different integrations that they have built in and other kinds of resources. Notice if I go to download, it'll take me to the Genymotion download. Genymotion is based off of VirtualBox, and it's a little bit more low level. So a lot of times what you need to do is build up the emulator by hand, right? Which is kind of something you need to do. And for, again, many years, I was using Genymotion more than anything else. Why? Android Studio, and before that, Eclipse, when I was programming with Android, didn't really have great emulation, right? In fact, if anything, it was terrible. Like I was really unhappy with it, right? So I moved into something a little bit better, and I found that at the time, Genymotion served my needs. But now I have to tell you that I don't use this, and I don't use Bluestacks because it's too gamey. Back to using Ldplayer, which I found that is kind of the best balance between gaming and everything else. And that's why I choose this. I'm telling you this only as a use case, right? But for me and for ICE 10, which is what we're doing this week, I don't care about this, right? I don't care about which emulator you use. Whichever one works for you, whichever one connects to, to Android is fine. Guillermo says, if I use my Android phone over USB, is fine as well. Yes, but how are you going to show it? And a great way to show your Android phone over USB, I'm just going to answer that. You're awesome, Guillermo, as always, is how do I show it on, on my screen? I have to record from it somehow, right? So I don't want you to use your camera or something weird to record your phone. And one of the best ways to do that is to use something called Visor. So let's go to Visor. If you're going to use your Android phone, this is your Android phone here. Visor is a free download for Android, and it'll even support iOS devices here as well. So download Visor, and again, compatible with, if I click download, it tells me that it's Windows, Mac, Linux, and a browser even. It'll even work on browsers as well. If I go to Mac, right, it'll actually tell me that there's only one version. I fear that, I have to be honest, with Visor for Mac, I'm not sure that it's going to be 100% compatible with, the new M1s, okay, if you're using this. But let me show you what Visor looks like. So remember I talked about my phone, okay? So my phone is still connected. Let's go back to my Android Studio for a second. And this is the other option. And I always say that the phone itself, so this one here, is the best emulator because it's not an emulator, it's a real device. So if I target my Samsung SM-G930W8, that's my S9 that's here as an example, right? If I click play, then it's going to run my app on my phone. And it's going to take its time. Let me just unlock it. You can't see anything yet, but I'm going to wait till this is done loading. And it's done. That's how fast it is. It's super fast, right? Way faster than bringing up the emulator and all that stuff, but you can't see it, right? So in order for me to unlock the ability for you to see it, I'm going to run Visor. So here's Visor. Let's run this up. My phone is doing its chiming. And what Visor does is it's pretty cool. It kind of connects with either iOS or Android devices that's here. It'll even show your emulator that's running too, right? And what you can do with Visor, and again, it's not super high resolution, but it's free. If I click play, right, I can actually view and control my device. All right, that's one thing that'll happen. So you can see that there it is. That's my actual device. That I have, right? There we go. And let me just log in off screen. There we go. And if I bring it back on, right, there we go. Look how beautiful it is. I have my thing and I can literally connect it. This is my actual phone, but I can control it from Visor. So if I click next here or previous or do one of these, right, as an example, or even click this, it's the exact same, right? So this is my actual device. And if you're going to do it, Guillermo, I recommend this. All right. No problem. And so I'm talking about these as options because it's truly up to you how you do stuff, right? If you want to set it up like this with an actual device or whatever it's going to be, okay? If I don't want to, again, what I can simply do is I can just close this off and I'm disconnected. That's Visor for you. So Visor, again, let me just go back to that link up here for Visor. Visor is if you want to use your actual device. And again, to me, as long as you're able to create a, there it is. If you're able to create a capture, a screen cap of your device, I'm good. Doesn't matter how you do it. All right, that's good for today so far. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll make our first Hello World app, which is going to be your ICE 10. Okay, that's what I want you guys to do. And all it is testing to see, do you have Android Studio ready? Can you make some adjustments to the app that we have already? We'll talk about the lifecycle a little bit, and we'll come back and we'll put that up as ICE 10. Let's stop recording now on YouTube. Okay, so guys, we're sitting here at, again, I'm looking at 7:53.